Who is the best Geometry Dash player of all time? This has been a question that has remained unanswered until now, as today I'll review every single quote-unquote best player in the past 10 years. During the early days of Geometry Dash, many players competed on the star leaderboard, a very hostile and ruthless place. New players would have the chance to sit on the throne, only to be booted off days later. However, someone named PissMC would be different. While most players were fresh out of 1,000 stars, PissMC was already heading for 2,000. He had nearly completed every single map uploaded onto the servers, but one remained: Demon World. From a first glance, you can immediately tell that Demon World has some unconventional designs. Nothing here feels like it was meant to be there. Just like it wasn't meant for PissMC to ever beat this creation, as 3 days after stumbling upon this creation and struggling, he would unfortunately lose all of his account data, and was never seen again. Around that time, many players would lose their account data, and would have to repeat everything if they wanted any shot at coming back. While this wasn't rare by any means, it doesn't make the situation feel any less dire. With the turn of the new year though, another player would soon begin a chain reaction that would define the future of many players around the world forever. And it only gets more insane from here. So consider subscribing, I'd appreciate it. With Geometry Dash heading into 2014, cheaters began taking advantage of the game. One of these culprits was a player named Sari. Sari was one of the first to hit 1,000 stars, an insane increase from 1,000 PissMC was competing against. It's likely these weren't legitimately gained though, as Sari had a very fishy past. Take Silent Club for example, a level that was only recently beaten a year or two ago by a very skilled player named Lukalizer. It took him months and being on a very high-end monitor. But hey, Sari claimed to beat it on a terrible 30 FPS phone 9 years ago. I'm totally not suspicious. Sari began losing interest soon after hitting 1,000 stars though, and so pivoted away from the game, with a player named LunarSim taking his throne. He would hold the throne for nearly a month, but his true skill in the game would be unleashed when he would beat an impossible level named Deadly Clubstep, a brutal reimagining of Clubstep that was illegitimately verified by its creator. Lunar was the first to beat this, but little did he know, his completion would kickstart an up-and-coming player's career: Riot. LunarSim's completion of Deadly Clubstep was celebrated throughout the community, but it was only the beginning. You see, a few exploits were found in the previous year that led to hundreds of impossible levels flooding the servers. While Rob did his best to delete them, a few would slip through the cracks and would be utterly despised by many players. The community had grown sick of levels that weren't playable, and so a player named Riot would step up to the task of conquering them. Shortly after beating Deadly Clubstep, Riot would get a golden ticket to the next big thing. You see, a couple months earlier, a player named GGBoy would release Cataclysm, which put Deadly Clubstep to shame. The level was brutal, so to cover up his tracks, he'd claim to beat the level in 80,000 attempts, way more than usual. This cover-up wouldn't last very long though, and he would eventually confess to hacking the level, but not before a race between some of the best players of the time would brew, with the most notable contenders being Riot, Giron David, Sandstorm, and Cyclic. Even though Cyclic would beat the level first, he would eventually confess the same way GGBoy did months earlier, and the true verifier would be revealed: Giron David. While Riot wasn't the first by any means, he would beat the level soon afterwards, solidifying his position among the top players. But it wouldn't end there. Only a few days later, he would complete Ice Carbon Diablo X, another impossible level created a year earlier. But this gave Riot an interesting idea. Instead of proving other people's impossible levels to be possible, what if instead he would make his own and actually beat it for once? And soon, Bloodbath would be released, unlike anything players had seen before. Since the level was actually meant to be beaten, it was really well made and loved by the community. Some players loved it so much in fact, that they would soon take it one step further. But we're getting a little too ahead of ourselves, as Riot had one more goal left on his list. Remember Cyclic, the player who claimed to beat Cataclysm first? Well, his claims were initially believed, however, not for long. You see, with the release of Bloodbath, Cyclic quickly noticed the fame Riot was getting, and wanted a piece of the pie for himself. Now instead of getting a team of creators to build a level for him, he decided instead to make one entirely by himself, dubbed Sonic Wave. The creation was brutal, but after a few days it would be verified, with one issue. Checking the description, Cyclic confesses to splicing the video, as he beat the level off recording. Without any legitimate proof, RobTop wouldn't rate the level for weeks, with Cyclic deciding to shelve the level in the end. Cyclic wasn't done just yet though, as he would come back again with an updated version of the level, and a legitimate verification. At least that's what many in the community believed, as only a couple weeks later, he would update the level to a remake of Back on Track and shortly later delete it. No one knew what was happening at the time, but years later, we knew this was the beginning of Cyclic's fall from grace. Soon, the level was dead. People were only beginning to realize how brutal the level truly was. It was unmatched by anything so far, until a player named Deem started playing. Deem was an insane player, clearing Cataclysm in only 3 months of playing. I remember when I played the game for 3 months, I was still stuck on Electroman Adventures, not a top 50 extreme demon. Anyhow, soon Deem would begin playing Sonic Wave, with Riot and a player named Mafui joining in. This situation was bizarre. You had a player who had begun playing only a few months earlier, a player whose hardest was Decode, and a player who was the rival of the creator. Unfortunately though, despite verifying the previous hardest level, Sonic Wave would prove to be too much for him, as after crashing at 96%, Riot would drop the level for good. Mafui would also fall just short, as he would suffer a devastating 98% fail. He would also quit the level, similarly to Riot, but what many people don't know is that his account would be auctioned on the geometrydash forums, with it selling for a little more than $100.
Mafui is an absolute nutcase for thinking people will fall for this. He's just trying to grab some cash for himself, and hoping that whatever fame he had on GD will help him get it. But if he wants cash, then why? Just why doesn't he go out and get it by means of actual work? Someone actually seriously bid on it? Well, guess Mafui's little plan worked.
Imagine if he pulled through. This left Deem all to himself, and eventually he would verify Sonic Wave. But who is Deem? Well, that player would be none other than Sonics. Ask anyone around that time, and they would say Sonics was the GOAT, holding an incredible grip on the community. Look at Yatagarasu, a level that would take 4 months to be beaten by Trusta. Sonics would beat this in 3 days. Sonics would soon be given the verification for Blade of Justice, one of the most hyped up levels of 2017. Similarly to Sonic Wave, this level would be completely unmatched, with several players dropping it beforehand. Sonics would end up getting 45 and 49 to 100, but would unfortunately have to drop it due to the level being incredibly laggy. Soon, the creator Manix would ask a player named Rico LP to nerf the level to have any hope of it releasing. Right after being nerfed, the level would be verified, with many people praising it for being underwhelming. Many felt like Manix could do better. With the verification of Bloodbath a couple months earlier, a creator named Manix would be intrigued. The level blew him away, but he felt like he could do the level even better, and soon Bloodlust would be created. The first victor, Quasar, would be appointed to be the verifier, but would soon drop it due to hand pains. Manix couldn't risk another Blade of Justice, so he took a shot in the dark and selected a very dedicated player by the name of Nobbleboy. Now before Bloodlust, Nobbleboy was a fish among a sea of others. While he was skilled at the game, he didn't stand out from the crowd, usually being late to many level races. After being given the verification, Nobbleboy would slowly and steadily begin making progress. Many rooted for him until he would go quiet. Noticing Nobbleboy's inactivity and the community's growing distaste for the long wait time, a player named Krazen would attempt to steal the level. Now, when you're stealing a level, you need to do a few things. First, you have to antagonize the person you're against, make them out to be a villain. Call them lazy, sluggish, unable even. Next, you have to downplay their work. Nobbleboy's version was significantly harder, yet Krazen ignored that, saying his rapid progress was just because he was better. Despite being clearly in the wrong, many sided with him. Most players are pretty young, and Krazen's obscene claims swindled many. Manix had quit the game by now, and some believed that the level was open for anyone to play. You can probably guess why that makes no sense. Eventually though, after a week of back and forths, Crazen would finally give in and let Naboboy continue verifying it. Well, what Crazen did was wrong. In the very least, it helped Naboboy get back on track. And finally, after 150,000 attempts, he would verify Bloodlust, placing it at the #1 spot. Everything Blade of Justice was hyped up to be. Naboboy's insane dedication paid off, and the level would go on to become an icon of Geometry Dash history. It would even be a stepping stone for the next player to take on the throne. On January 28th, 2019, a level by the name of Zodiac would be published to the servers by a rising player, Xander. After being raided a few weeks later, it would immediately be placed at the #1 spot, an insane feat for such an underrated player. But some had their suspicions. You see, Xander hadn't really been public with his progress, and his verification didn't even have any clicks. While this would have been understandable a couple years ago, times were quickly changing and evidence was being pushed for. Unsurprisingly, Xander would confess to hacking a couple months later, a dire fate for the level that had so many creators behind it. Would this become another Sonic wave? No, not really. You see, with Technical beating Bloodlust a couple months earlier, he was craving a new challenge, and with the release of Zodiac, this was a perfect opportunity to get a new hardest. After streaming nearly every single day for a month, and a terrible fail right at the end, Technical would finally complete the level, becoming the true verifier. But this wouldn't be the end of Technical's tale. In Update 2.0, a popular creator named Anubis would release El Dorado, a level where he traversed a jungle to find a city full of gold. This creation is an absolute classic, and it's unsurprising that a few creators would soon get together to remake El Dorado into the Golden. Despite the remake being quite underwhelming, removing almost everything that made El Dorado so good, its status as a potential top 1 kept it in relevancy. The Golden was attempting to dethrone Tartarus, a Riot level that was recently verified by a top player named Dolphy. The Golden would be given to a rising player named Enswish, and Technical's position would soon be threatened. He would soon begin playing Tartarus, and to cash in on the opportunity, Enswish would jump on the bandwagon as well, managing to complete it before Technical. This shocks the community. One of the best players was being outdone by someone at #2. Eventually, Enswish would return back to the Golden, verifying it after around 50,000 attempts. While the level would end up being placed below Tartarus, it would still allow him to place above Technical on the stats viewer. With the throne all to himself, his conquest of the entire main list would begin, which if you don't know are the top 75 hardest levels. Sounds pretty familiar, doesn't it? Enzo should be the first person ever to complete such a feat, with a more controversial player soon following suit. During the intense conflict between Ensosh and Technical, an up-and-coming player would beat Decode as his first demon. What's so special about that though? Well, the special thing would be what he would do afterwards, beating the Golden as his 5th demon. Upon posting this completion to YouTube, it would send shockwaves throughout the community. How was this possible? What most people didn't know at the time, however, was that hours ago he made one of the most important decisions of his entire career. You see, on the completion, he accidentally had a hack called No Clip On, which allows you to phase through walls. His run would be so accurate that he wouldn't notice it until after some time had passed. Devastated, he decided to push this completion anyway, later stating that if people noticed, he would quit anyway. But surprisingly, no one did. Space would go on to beat Slaughterhouse, a remake of an iconic Impossible level that Ice Cave had put months of work into. Looking back, this verification is so hard to watch, from the intro all the way to the super forced reaction.
I can't fucking react, otherwise I'm gonna cough so much.
How come no one caught this earlier? Well, someone did, a player by the name of Colo, but due to so many people believing that Space was legitimate, no one batted an eye. Soon enough, a popular player named Doggy would finish off Slaughterhouse legitimately, becoming the true verifier with the turn of the new year, but not garnering nearly as much attention. Space had effectively conquered the community, as he was influencing many changes to the ever-growing demon list. If he didn't like someone verifying a difficult level, he could have a big say in undermining that achievement. While many levels had been verified in 2021, it wasn't nearly as much as the other years, and with Space at the top, things were only going to get worse from here. Or would it? With the turn of the new year, another player named Zoink began rapidly progressing on Slaughterhouse, eventually beating it. Little did he know, he would soon be immersed into one of the biggest conflicts thus far since Riot versus Cyclic. After his completion, Zoink would quickly begin rising on the demon list, even being able to race on Silent Clubstep, which had just been verified. While Zoink was extremely quick to beat it, Space showed no interest, which was odd. Usually when a level is completed, Space is one of the first victors, but with Silent Clubstep it felt like Space was actively avoiding it, likely due to how hard it is to cheat on. Space had made a pretty big mistake though, as Zoink was beginning to get the higher ground on him. And so when Acheron would be verified by Zoink, Space would slay it within a few days. Their conflict was at an all-time high, when all of a sudden, Space got caught. In a video by Packway, Space was exposed for having inconsistent click delays in some of his most recent replays. With his back against the wall, Space claimed that he had recently become bored of the game, and that he had only cheated on his newest replays. Many players surprisingly believed him, as it had been pretty prominent through his YouTube that he had been getting bored of the game. Unlike most stories though, this isn't where it would end. Soon, people found another method to expose Space, through the level completion screen being slightly off. And almost his entire catalog would be deemed illegitimate. You see, when someone gets caught, they try to downplay what they did as much as possible. It's human nature. It's not surprising that Space attempted to de-emphasize what he did wrong. Space would soon delete his channel though, and has recently begun attempting to rebeat all of his achievements, with a lot of backlash. While on the other end, Zoink has had a very flourishing career, verifying levels like Avernus. While Space has done a ton of damage to the community, it wasn't all bad, as similarly to Cyclic, he would push many around him to continue growing their skill. But remember, history will always repeat itself. When 2.2 releases, the entire playing scene will change, and with the community having to adapt to all these new changes, lots of cheaters will slip through the cracks. Don't believe everything you see. Anyway, if you're interested in how top 1s have changed over the years, be sure to check out the video on screen, and as always, thanks for watching.